Carla again, and thank you for visiting me at Middle of the Road. Today's story is going to be about Airbnb. I'm often asked about this because for about 3 years we had an Airbnb in our basement. Where we live, we have a walkout basement, so it's a lot of light down there, and it had a kitchen and bathroom and shower and everything. So we did it up quite nicely, actually, if I do say so myself, and offered it as an Airbnb. And we did that for 3 years and managed to do pretty well at it. It, generally speaking, would cover our mortgage every month and some months more. So it really worked out well for us. However, we did meet some interesting people during that time. Now, we were lucky. We did not have anybody come in, have a big party and place or trash place or anything like that. And I think one of the reasons that we were that lucky was that we were on site, and we made it clear in our posting that we were on site. And so this would often, I'm sure, deter people that thought they were going to come and have a big party, because they knew that the owners were close by and would know about it. So we were lucky that way. However, we did have some unusual people come to stay with us. So I thought I would share a couple of those stories with you. The first one I wanted to share is about the guy who wouldn't leave. He had contacted me to set up a time to come, and he wanted to do it like that night. And although we were available, he somehow didn't have the ability to pay for it through Airbnb. I think he didn't have a credit card, and you need a credit card through Airbnb. And so he had tried to do things like purchase a prepaid visa and talk to a buddy and all of this kind of stuff. So it didn't work out. That should have been my first clue. But it didn't work out that time, and I forgot about him, and off he went. And then he tried again. And this was probably about a month later, and he had figured out the credit card stuff, so he was able to book the Airbnb. He was coming from up north, where there's a lot of oil rig workers, etc. And he wanted just a weekend to get away on his own. I thought, yeah, okay. I never really delved too much into what my guests were doing, but I thought, okay, well, that's fine. So he came, and he was very, very quiet. I don't know if he even left. Most of the time his vehicle was parked there, but it was dead silence down there. And I thought it was a little bit odd, but again, not my business. What we did for cleaning was we had cleaners come in, and so checkout was at noon, and they would come in probably around 12:30, 1 o'clock, clean the place up, change the bedding, all of that kind of stuff. And then if we had somebody booked in, they would be coming anytime after 3. So that gave us a window of about minimum 3-hour turnover time. So our cleaners show up around 12:30, and they tell me this is what happened because I wasn't in the house at the time. They knocked on the door because it was locked, and there was no answer. So they took the key, they opened it up. So this is just like you would do in a hotel room. The maid knocks, nobody answers, opens up the door, and they realize that there are still a pair of shoes and a jacket and stuff like that. And they're like, oh no, somebody's still in here. So they kind of retreat to the outside, but he pops his head in and he calls out, hello, is anybody here? Anybody here? And nothing. And so they shut the door, and they're standing there. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So they banged a couple more times. The guy sticks his head out of the bedroom and goes, what do you want? And the cleaner sticks his head in, and he says, we're here to clean up. It's past checkout. He goes, yeah, I'm coming. And he slams the bedroom door. So the cleaners go, and they sit in their car, and they wait. And they wait, and they wait. And there's no action. Like, they don't see the guy come out, pack up, nothing. So after about 20 minutes of this, the cleaners go back down, knock on the door again. The guy sticks his head out and starts swearing at them. And he is obviously still in bed, like he hasn't moved. And so at that point, the the cleaners contacted me and said, like, what do we do? Like, I'm not comfortable like trying to kick this guy out, but what's going on? So I hurried home, and the way the Airbnb was set up, there was the external door, which is where the cleaners were trying to get in, and then there was a door between the upstairs and downstairs. So there was an interior door, and that's locked on both sides. But so I went down and banged on the door, and there was nothing. So I banged some more because I knew he was in there. And eventually he comes to the door, and he's obviously still been in bed, and he's kind of groggy. He's like, yeah. I said, it is way past checkout time. You have got to leave. And he's like, oh, yeah, no problem. He was being nice to me because he knew I was the owner. And so anyway, long story short, it took about 2 hours to get him out of there. But the funny part was about 6 weeks later, he tried to book again. And the way you can do it on, or the way it works on Airbnb, as the hostess, if I say I would not recommend him to another host, then he can't book at my place again. So he had tried to book, he couldn't. He contacted me and he said, I don't understand why I can't book. It's saying I can't book. And so I responded and I said, I'm sorry, but you know, we have a tight turnover, and I can't have somebody in here that I don't know is going to be gone. And he had some swear words for me then and was quite annoyed. But yeah, I just thought that was funny that he really had no clue that he was costing me extra money because the cleaners were sitting around waiting for him to leave, that he was throwing off the schedule, and that, you know, he wasn't supposed to be there. So that was the guy who wouldn't leave. But then, and that was pretty minor. Like, I mean, it was annoying as all heck, and I couldn't figure out, well, I think I figured out once we got in there and once the cleaners got in there, we realized that the man had, or the young man had just come and was on a bender all weekend. Like, I think he just was down there drinking the whole weekend by himself because there were empty bottles everywhere, and I think he just didn't get up because he had passed out. So I just thought, no, I don't want that in my house. So then there was the guy who contacted me. He had booked, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks in advance, and he was there for I think 3 nights. And he was coming from Saskatchewan, I want to say. Let's just say Saskatchewan for lack of... I don't know if that's where he lived, but he was coming from that direction. And for those of you who don't know Airbnb, the way it works is you see the post, you see the listing, you see the pictures, you can read the rules of the house, etc. So one of mine was absolutely no smoking of any kind. So I don't care. Here in Canada, pot is legal. I don't care. I don't want the smoke in my house. I don't want cigarette smoke in my house, etc. We had a dog upstairs, but there was never any dogs downstairs, and so we made people aware of that so that if they were really sensitive, etc. So you kind of like, you know, just lay out your groundwork before they ever book so that they know whether or not that's going to suit them. So anyway, he had booked about a week and a half, 2 weeks in advance. He was on his way from Saskatchewan, and I get a message from him, and he said, I just noticed that it's not the whole house. And I said, well, no, it's $75 a night. It's not the whole house. And I say that clearly in my posting. He said, well, where? So I had to take a screenshot and send him where it clearly says that it, you know, this basement suite. And he says, well, the pictures are misleading because the pictures show upstairs. Well, they didn't. They showed downstairs. But it was a really nice place, and the windows are big because it's a walkout basement, and so it did look like upstairs, but it wasn't. He says, well, I'm not happy with that, and I'm going to cancel it. And I said, okay, you're free to cancel. Well, the way Airbnb works is as the hostess, I get to pick the cancellation level. And when they book, they agree to that cancellation level. And mine was medium, which meant that if you try to cancel before closer than 5 days to your booking, you would pay for the first night, and then you would pay for 50% of the nights after that. So he's on his way. It's the day of at this point. And so if he wanted to cancel, he would have still had to pay for that night and 50% of the other 2 nights. So he would have had to pay the $150 for 2 nights. And so he got off, that was it. It was quiet. And then he came back on the messenger a little while later and he said, I can't, they said that I have to pay for this much. And I'm like, yeah, that's the cancel. Well, I didn't know that. Well, you agreed to it when you booked. Okay, so he says, well, can you cancel it then? Well, if I, the hostess, cancel it, it goes against my rating because, of course, Airbnb doesn't want a bunch of hostesses that are flaking on their guests who have been counting on this place to stay that night. So, and I knew that, so I'm like, no, I'm not canceling. I'm here. The house is here. The suite is here. You come on in, and I've upheld my end of the contract, so no, you have to cancel. Well, he was back and forth, and he was really, you could tell he was just getting more and more annoyed. And then finally he says, wait a minute, you have dogs upstairs, and me and my daughter were severely allergic, and we can't stay there. And I said, well, it states clearly in the listing, and you agreed to it, so that's not a valid reason to cancel. You know, if it's going to be an issue, you will have to pay for it, etc. So I get this this message back, well, okay, we will, but if my daughter ends up in the hospital, you know, I just hope she doesn't end up in the hospital. And I'm thinking, oh, dude, you know, no. I'm a mother of 3. I wrote the book on guilt. You're not going to try that on me. So anyway, he finally showed up, and this was after, like, it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and we were still haggling about this over the phone. And I had contacted Airbnb and said, look, this is the situation. They looked at my posting. They said, no, it's obvious that it's a basement. You clearly state that there's pets there. You're completely in the clear that way. And then they confirmed that, yes, he had tried to call in and he was upset and all of this kind of stuff. I said, there's nothing I can do about that. I've upheld my end of the contract. He obviously did not read this posting. He took a look at a couple pictures, decided that was good enough and the price was right, and booked it. And he did not actually read the listing. So it was about 9 o'clock at night and he showed up. And he was a little bit snarky, but not too bad. Like, I still felt okay about him being there. It wasn't like I was afraid of him or anything like that. Like, because, you know, sometimes when you're letting people into your home, even though there's a locked door between you, yeah, it's iffy. But no, it was fine. I wasn't impressed with the man, but okay. So and that was the other thing. I said, wait a minute, you and your daughter, you've booked down here as one person is coming. This is a reservation for one. Well, no, my wife and my daughter are with me. I'm like, okay, you need to let me know whoever's going to be with you, because for fire regulations, if there's ever a fire and, you know, the firefighters are there and we think nobody else is down there because you've been pulled out, they're not going to be looking for anybody else. Like, we need to know how many people and who's in our house. So, and on top of that, if you booked more than 2, how did I have that? If you booked more than 2, then you had to pay like $10 or $20 a person afterwards. Now with a kid, I think the kid was like 2 or 3 years old. I wouldn't have bothered with that, but it was just kind of annoyed me that people try and kind of play the system a little bit, but whatever. So he came in, he brought his wife and his daughter in and whatnot. And he sent a message up. He goes, oh, it's really nice here. Thank you. And so I'm like, okay, good. You know, he's calmed down a little bit. Well, it was fairly noisy. Let's just put it that way. It was a fairly noisy guest stay. Their daughter was screaming and yelling most of the time. And I don't know if they were still sleeping or not paying attention. I don't know. They just let her scream. So whatever. And so then so they had 3 nights, and after the 3rd night, I get a message from him, and he said, can we book another 2 nights. And I kind of chuckled to myself and thought, oh, I thought it wasn't working for you. And I thought it, you wanted to cancel so badly. He goes, no, I'd like another 2 nights. We're really enjoying it here. It's very nice. I'm glad we stayed, etc. So I happened to have the calendar open, so I booked him for that. And so that would have been a total of 5 nights they stayed. And then he wanted another extension. Well, I had somebody else coming and I had to say no. And so they left. And we went downstairs, and it was the worst condition that a guest has ever left our Airbnb. Oh, we had a great big huge ottoman that was cloth, but it was big enough and firm enough that you put a tray on it with books and whatever in the living room, and it was stained. We had white bath mats. They had ink on them. I don't know why there was ink in the bathroom, but there was ink on them. There was stuff all over the floor and rings on the tables and the coffee table from drinks, and they had spilt some kind of a drink on the floor. It was all sticky. They hadn't bothered to clean it up. There was crumbs everywhere. The sink was just piled high with dirty dishes that were just all dried up, and like, it wasn't just I didn't do my dishes today. It was like we've stored them here. It was just gross. And so that was probably the most frustrating one. Then we had a situation where, again, a guy booked, didn't tell us he was bringing his girlfriend, because I don't know why. I think they think that they're getting away with something when in fact 2 people could come and not pay extra. But anyway, so they came, and it was probably, they came around the 3 or 4 o'clock mark, and it was probably around 6 or 7 o'clock, and the screaming starts. And my husband and I are having this conversation about, is this them screaming at each other, or are they having a siesta? Because we'd had a few situations like that where we could hear them having a siesta, and but we couldn't quite tell. So after a while, we thought, well, this is getting kind of crazy. Like, somebody could be hurt down there. We don't know. And so I sent him a text, and there was no response. But it went quiet for a while. So we thought, okay. And then it was a couple of hours later, and it started up again, this screaming. And then we heard glass. It sounded like glass break. We're like, holy crap, what's going on down there? So we go down, and I knocked on the door and waited a little bit, and I knocked some more, and this girlfriend comes to the door, and she opens up the door like this, and I said, is everything okay? I thought I heard some glass breaking. And she says, yeah, we were just having sex. And I'm thinking, first of all, you didn't have to tell me that. You could have just said, no, everything is fine. But anyway, she was an unusual girl. And so we had a quick conversation. I just said, well, I heard some glass break, and I was concerned that, everything was okay. No, everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. There was no glass broke. No, everything's fine. And so they toned it down for that night. And then the next morning, we go into the kitchen in the morning, and we can smell pot, like really bad. And to the point where there's no way they're doing that outside. It's got to be in the house. So I go down and I knock on the door, and he answered all bleary-eyed, whatever. And I'm thinking, it's morning, like, come on. And I said, there is no smoking in the house. He says, oh, nobody's smoking. I'm like, yeah, no, you are. I can smell it. It takes nothing to, like, the smell. Like, I mean, it's just... Anyway, I was in a really crappy mood and fed up with these people at this point. And so I said, well, you guys need to leave. What? And he starts swearing at me. And so I just turned and walked away. And my husband wasn't home at that point, and so I just got ready and I left the house, and I phoned Airbnb and I said, look, this is what's going on, and now he's swearing at me and being a little bit aggressive. I'm just not comfortable being there, and I need you to ask him to leave, because I've already done it, but he hasn't. He has said that he's not leaving. So I asked Airbnb to step in, and they did. They called and they told him that he would have to be out and whatnot. And so they called me back and they said, well, he said he'll be gone in an hour. And I'm like, okay. So I went and I kept myself busy for an hour, and it's kind of a not a great feeling, because you're away from your home and you don't know what they're doing in your home. And when you come back, you hope they're actually gone. But you know, luckily they left, and the place was messy, but it wasn't that bad. And so we just changed the lock code and moved on. But yeah, other than that, you know, we've had some really great experiences. I would certainly recommend it to anybody. You need to take certain precautions, but it's really interesting to meet the different kind of people that are out there, and the travelers, people that are coming to your country from other countries, and hearing about their travels and what they're enjoying and what they're interested in seeing and whatnot. And yeah, so it was a lot of fun. We've decided not to do it anymore, and in fact my daughter's living with us. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it and would do it again.